IK Multimedia's T-RackS CS Quad series of processors consists of 4 different multiband processors: Quad Comp, a compressor; Quad Lim, a limiter; Quad Image, a stereo image processor; and De-Esser, a multiband de-esser, all available in the custom shop. In this video, I'll be looking at the first 2, Quad Comp and Quad Lim. Multiband processors let you split the signal into a number of frequency bands. In the case of the Quad series, 4 bands, except for the De-Esser, which is 3, and they let you separately apply the processing to each band. This allows for more precise processing in situations where you want to affect a defined part of the signal, but not all of it. So why multiband compression? Well, a conventional single-band compressor will compress evenly across the frequency range of the audio it's fed. That's great in most situations, but what if there's only one part of the frequency range, let's say a loud kick drum in a whole mix, that's triggering the compression? Then everything will get squashed down every time that kick hits, which might not sound so good. Multiband processing is great because it lets you process selectively within a track's frequency range, leaving the rest alone or processing the other bands less, depending on how you set it. It's particularly useful in mastering situations where you're processing mixed tracks with lots of elements in different frequency ranges, but it's also handy on individual tracks inside of a mix or buses with multiple tracks. So let's look at the interface on Quad Comp. It's quite similar to the Quad Lim interface and has many basic similarities to the other 2 quad processors. I've loaded up a drum loop to show how it works. The snare in this loop is particularly mid-rangey sounding, and it's kind of muddying up the loop. So I'm going to try to compress only the more mid-rangey parts of the track in order to try to clean it up. I figure I'm going to be compressing mostly in the lower mid-range. The frequency display area is where you set the crossover points for the different frequency bands. You can adjust how many bands you use, and the default is 4. The solo control is very useful for figuring out where to set the frequencies, as you can solo the audio on the selected frequency band. That makes it easier to set it accurately, and you can hear what will be processed. I'll adjust the crossover points as I listen soloed, and I'm setting them between about 120 and 600 Hz for this frequency band. Because I've selected this band, it's active in the controls below, so I'll turn the threshold down and the ratio up because I want to heavily compress this snare. You see the thin line that's moving underneath the frequency band? That's showing gain reduction. You also see separate meters on the right that show gain reduction for each frequency band. Here it is bypassed. And now with Quad Comp in. I was able to get rid of some of that mud without crushing the entire track. Especially when you have a lot of cymbals on a drum track, you don't necessarily want to compress them as they can sound washy and strange. And also in a mastering situation, you might be trying to zero in on one element of a mixed track, or in this case I'm trying to affect the snare drum inside of a mixed drum track and affect the rest of the drums as little as possible. You can also manually boost or cut the gain in each frequency band by dragging the white control points in the frequency display or using the gain knob. The gain control functions like a rather coarse equalizer in that sense, since you can boost or cut those frequency ranges with it. Now the slope control is an interesting one because it affects how precisely Quad Comp will adhere to the crossover points you set. Right now it's on the default of 24 dB per octave and processes mainly within the bands that you set. Set it low and you get more overlap between the bands. Set it at its highest setting, 48, and the compression adheres rigidly to the crossover points. You can see it in the display. Now let's look at Quad Lim. It has almost the same controls, except no ratio knob since a limiter uses a high fixed ratio, usually around 20:1. It also has a brick wall button, which kicks in a brick wall limiter placed after the multiband limiter in the signal chain, and you can use that to make sure you don't push any of the individual bands into distortion. That's pretty handy. Let's say we're working on a mastering situation on this mix. As you can hear, it's rather bass heavy. So if you're running through a limiter to make the mix louder, you can do so while de-accentuating the lows that are too loud. Here's a setting I preset with the heaviest amount of limiting in the 20 Hz to 150 Hz area, and then lesser amounts in the 150 to 1K region and the 1K to 4.5K region. I've also got slight gain boosts set in the upper 2 frequency bands to add a little definition. Now let's compare with and without. Here's without. Now here's with. And with the slope set higher, you get an even more pronounced effect. Lower, it's a bit more subtle. You can also set Quad Comp and Quad Lim to MS or mid-side mode, which lets you compress the middle and sides of the stereo image separately. That can be really handy in a situation where you have something on the outer edges that you want to compress, or if you just want to compress or limit what's going up the middle, bass, kick drum, vocals, whatever. Click on the mid button and adjust the mid band, and then click on the side button to adjust the side band. There's lots of precision and flexibility in these plugins. That's a brief look at how to use Quad Comp and Quad Lim from IK Multimedia's T-RackS Quad series of multiband processors.